Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics podcast, everybody. Today we have on Diane Farr, and you probably know Diane Farr from Fire Country. Welcome to the show, Diane.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, it's really an interesting concept, Fire Country, which I know is it based on some truth, where a convicted felon can reduce their time served by fighting wildfires. How did you react to taking on this role?
It came to me at the end of the pandemic. So, like most people, I was pretty eager to get to work, period. I have three kids, and I had had a rule for 15 years that I only worked in LA and only in comedy and only in cable because those are the shortest schedules in television. And it would keep me from spending my whole life on a set and their whole life with a nanny. So by this point, they were pretty old. We had been together for 2 years. And when this came in, they were like, "You have an offer for this show, but it shoots in Canada." And I said, "Let me look. Let me have a look at it." So the two writers that wrote it with Max, who created it, I've known for a long time, and they know my kids, and they're excellent writers. And I thought, yeah, this might really be worth it. It had more heart than most TV pilots start off with. Everybody wants to stay in a safe format that they think is going to work. But because it was dealing with inmate firefighters, it had this whole redemption theme about who's a good guy and who's a bad guy, and what do we say in society about people? Do we write them off forever, or is there another chance? So it was like a perfect cocktail. And it was one of those jobs from the second you got on it that you were like, this is going to go for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Wasn't it number one? Was it?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. For that, when it started, though, it's really amazing. And you've
Yeah.
played firefighters before, which is really wild.
So random, right? It's my third time playing a firefighter, the most famous one being Rescue Me.
Mhm.
And I only have two uncles. They're both firefighters. Like casting people are a little bit of a mystic sometimes, I think. My my real life boyfriend is one of the directors on our show, and his name is Eagle. And Billy Burke was wearing a hat the other day with an eagle on it. And I was looking at him and asking, he's like, "Yeah, if I was going to identify with an animal, that's the one I'm most identified with." And I was like, "Oh my God, the casting people really did a good job."
That's
Like,
so funny. Yeah.
like they didn't know, he wasn't even my boyfriend at the time, but it's just really funny when they get it all right. So there's something in my energy that screams firefighter over and again.
With this show, you've done series before, obviously, and you just said you knew it was going to go for a long time. What is it? What sense do you get when you read a script that this is going to go for a while?
There are certain franchises that people like, right? We have law, we have medical, we have police, and we have um, firefighters to a lesser degree because it's an exciting time to see people. In theory, you're seeing them in a life or death situation, which heightens the drama. So you get a lot of those scripts, but they don't have any heart. They feel like they were just made for the formula. But because this was about inmate firefighters trying to put themselves back in society through firefighting, it just gave you a whole other layer. And then Joan and Tony are so good. That's the writers that wrote out the script with Max from his totally personal, real ideas. Um, they were sort of making it about a family more than just a firehouse. So, I am a diehard Grey's Anatomy fan from the beginning, and I was dying to see who was going to bump into who there. But I think that in most instances, other than Grey's, that gets really old.
Yeah,
Who am I
yeah.
slipping? So then the idea of looking at a family and how do they keep working together really gave me like Friday Night Lights vibe or LA Law, just any of those really long standing ones because they were dealing with more character than franchise.
Right. And as the role of being the mother of one of the inmates, is it brings this whole other element in when you're having to deal with your child having these issues and they're working with you. So it's
Yes.
yeah, so it's really
Oh,
amazing.
we could
Mm-hmm.
do that one forever, right? This is the
Yes.
first job I've ever had where I played the matriarch. Like I played a mom before. The first time I played a mom, I think the girl was 8 years younger than me. It was ludicrous. But now I am fully of an age where I could be Bodhi's mother. But there's also just the archetype of what a matriarch is. You know, it's sort of like a queen in a sense. And I never took jobs where I was just a straight up romantic interest. Like I was never an ingenue. I don't have any save me energy. I don't really need to be rescued. But this was the first time I was like, oh, I see. And it was a weird transition on set in my own head. And then I really just had the presence of mind to be like, what do I wish somebody showed me when I started? Why don't I take on that role of how to ask for things or which things to ask for? And that's been a pleasure because again, I feel like most women, we see the meta easier than we see the singular. And I have a hard time when I'm hired to do a singular job to stay in my lane. I my brain is going faster than that usually. So this character gets to look at the meta all the time, which is amazing.
You also mentioned in an interview recently that it was nice to have a partner who's your age, over 50, as opposed to that age disparity where one partner or a child is 8 years younger than you and you play their mother. What was that like to actually have someone who is your age playing your partner?
It's so wonderful. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's so much easier for me as the female when I'm not in this inherent lie, when I'm pretending to be a peer with someone who is old enough to be my dad, but also he and I have the same amount of experience. So we can negotiate a scene in the most productive way, in the best way for the script itself. He's arguing to get to his truth, and he understands if he changes three of his lines, that it has a tremendous effect on mine. So we are both capable of looking at something other than just our side of the story. And then to have a partner that can go back and forth with you where I'm not apologizing for having a voice because we're the same age and I don't have to sort of bow down because this person clearly knows more than I do. Um, it's wonderful. I think people like Vince and Sharon so much because we treat each other like equals and we come off like equals.
Right. And that's such a great message just to people out there is okay, this is what a relationship should look like.
Yes.
And I've seen interviews too where you've said, this actor's like some actor that's well over your age and it's established that you can't say anything. You feel like you can't do that. What, being on a set with all of like the fires that they have on there, that just terrifying or what is that like? What's happening when all of these things are happening on the set?
It's just really exciting. It's not dangerous once you're there. There are so many safety meetings, there's so many departments involved. Before we get onto the set, they have practiced and rehearsed them. So once we're in turnout gear, we shoot in Canada, so it's really cold, and we shoot outside, not inside building fires for the most part. It's so cold out. The gear we have on is totally fireproof. We will go and stand against the fire on the takes. Like they get mad at us because the gloves we have are fireproof, and I will hold onto the pole where the fire is coming out of. And they're like, stop it, because now we have to regel the fire thing because my gloves can't go on fire, but it'll keep me warm. So the fire feels far less dangerous than sex scenes or having to cry at the exact moment. The fire just becomes like a nothing burger over time.
Okay, because that kind of terrified me.
Well, and it's not your first time playing a firefighter, so you're kind
Right.
of used to
Yeah.
it. I
Yeah.
read I read the article you wrote about sex scenes and how unsexy a sex scene is. And I would love to talk to you about the fact that you're so honest in it and it really makes people realize that? I mean, you start off by saying they apologize. Sometimes they get, and sometimes they don't.
Yes.
What what made you want to write this, and how uncomfortable is it really to do those sex scenes?
Sometimes it depends on your partner, but to me, always the most uncomfortable thing is even when they lock down a set, there's a minimum of 15 to 20 people in the room with you. So you're trying to do a very choreographed thing. And we all know there are certain positions my body looks good in, and there are certain positions it looks awkward in. So I got to try and keep myself in the position I want. And I have to hit this choreography in the right timing and then make you feel something while I'm doing it. So it's like you can't really be wild and out there while you're being self-conscious. So that's the most uncomfortable piece, is the people in the room that are watching you do it. So it's so choreographed. I don't think I've only ever had one or two times where it felt like maybe the co-partner, the person in my scene, had a design on me more than the scene. And that was their problem. Like, that isn't what made me uncomfortable. What made me uncomfortable was, am I going to be able to make this sexy while I'm trying to hit the choreography? You know, like a dance of any kind, you can't make it flashy and fun until you really have those steps down. So you never have enough time to get those step down, the step down. I do ride a motorcycle in real life now, that's why we have it on the show, because I ride one in real life. And I went on a horseback riding trip with my kids, and it got a little perilous by the end. And I was like, I would never get on another person's motorcycle because I know the temperament of my inanimate object motorcycle. A horse feels like the same thing, but now that horse could be hungry or tired or ill. It's almost the same thing with the sex scene. You're trying to work out the choreography of, can I hit all these gears at the time I'm supposed to, but there's another person in there, and you also have to make it work with them.
And they make it look believable. I don't know, you know.
It's awkward, and I think some people are better at it than others. And I'm pretty comfortable with my own body. I've definitely worked with men and women that are so uncomfortable with their body that that's mostly what they're thinking about. So it's a strange level of intimacy at work.
And you do a lot of writing. So you've been an author and you do a lot of writing. How, do these things just like come to you and you just put it out there? How does that go about with the writing?
Yeah, it almost feels like you're bursting to say something. So then it becomes, I'm going to go say this. Who can I say it to? Who will listen to me about this? I don't think I've pitched many things that don't go, because even with the sex scene, I think the original title of that was What It Feels Like to Be Naked at Work, because people think, oh, here's this really hot actor and you get to make out with them. I'm like, I'm not really making out. And it's not really that sexy. You're bonded to them at the end of it, but you're more like trauma bonded than you are sexually bonded.
Well, I thought it was so funny because then you say, and we do it 20 more times. So it's like bad enough to do
it one time. Yeah, I could see the trauma bonding there too. Yeah. I mean, gosh.
How'd you get into acting? Like, what was the start for you?
I grew up in New York, and I started modeling when I was really young. I was really tall. I feel like at the time in the early 80s in New York, it was like I was tall and I was thin, and you were walking down the street and it was like, hey, come put on these clothes and we'll pay you the tiniest amount of money possible, but you'll get that little inch of prestige. And I did that from, I think I started at 12 or 13 all the way up to college. And by college, I wanted to travel and I wanted to be a diplomat. And I started in a pre-law major, and it was so boring. And I was being told over and over, it doesn't matter if you can speak any languages, you're going to be in Guam as a woman till you're like 50. Like, you can forget your dreams of France or Lebanon or, like exciting or cool, whatever you wanted it to be. They were like, no, you're going to be in the middle of nowhere. So I wandered into the theater department and started doing things there and didn't tell my parents for, I don't know, 2 years. I think by the time I confessed, I had changed my major. And they were furious. I was the first person in my family to go to college. They were like, this is a waste of money and time, and you can never work again. And my mother had the presence of mind to say, you don't want to be an actor. You want to be a star. You better go learn how to act. So I transferred to a college in England. And I have this really old-fashioned Shakespeare theater training, which did very little for me when I came out of school. But it definitely washed off the idea of, today we have influencers who can become anything they want. But at the time, it seemed like, oh, she's really a model. She's not an actress. So that was all wiped away. And it was a really slow burn, I think, because of the thing I said earlier, because I did not have an ingenue quality. I did not have a little lass that needed to be rescued from a lily pad. There was none of that. I didn't really work regularly until I was getting close to 30, where the formidability that I carry or the strength that I carry could be paired with men in their 40s and 50s. And then it started to work. I was never, I've played the love interest, but I'm never a straight up love interest. I think I'm more heady than that. Mm-hmm. So by the time I hit 30, I also had a little bit more life experience, which made me a better employee. And then it went well from there.
Mm-hmm. And you were on Love Lines or with Dr. Drew. Oh my goodness. It's so funny. My husband used to listen to that all the time. And I would hear him in the basement just burst out laughing at things. And I'd be like, what are you doing? What are you laughing at? But I was telling him, I said, I'm going to interview Diane Farr tomorrow that was on Love Lines. What was that like working on that? That you had to hear all kinds of crazy things on there.
It was nonstop crazy things. That was a really good one. So I've been in LA for like 2 years and I couldn't get arrested. Like I had done some great Broadway shows in New York and I moved to LA and it was a whole other gear. I didn't understand what was expected of me in auditions. And somehow I went in for this audition to co-host this thing. And on the bottom of my resume, my pay the rent job in in LA when I moved there I was teaching acting in a maximum security men's prison. And it said it on the bottom of the resume. So they asked me to come in because of that. They thought, well, if she can handle that, some question about is not going to make her roll off the couch here at Loveline. So I screen tested for that and for Party of Five on the same day. So I was either going on this very established show or I was going to be a sex expert. And, everybody in my life was rooting for the Party of Five. And I was like, no, I think I can use my voice. So that's where I started writing. So I got that job and it was really like being Ed McMahon to the two guys who had been doing it for a long time. We used to shoot 4 shows a day on Thursdays and Fridays around their radio schedule. We'd shoot 200 episodes in a season. It was so intense, but because of it, I started writing for magazines. And then the magazines just didn't really understand women. Like they were trying to sell products, obviously. So the first book I wrote was a retort to how stupid they were treating women. I was like, we are much more complex than this. So it was giving me everything that I needed, but man, was that a wild couple of years. It was also the most fame I ever had. It was on every day and it was very racy subject matter. So I couldn't be in public airports. I had to move. So people broke into my house, my car.
No.
Like, it was, and you make no money on MTV. It was just nonstop visibility. So it was a very interesting argument to my mother's early idea that I just want to be famous. It became very clear to me that I was like, I don't want to be famous. I actually want to act. I asked to leave Loveline after 2 years because I was like, I don't have enough money for this
Right.
much security.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I went on the Drew Carey show after that. And it was very clear. I was like, no, I actually want to act. So that was one of the great things that came out of that job.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was, I can see you definitely, it comes across no nonsense, or, I don't even say you have fun, but it's like, okay, let's get real. Let's have something out here for women out here. So, and
Yeah.
was it The Girl Code? Was that the book that you wrote? Yes.
Yeah. That was the
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was like the secret language of single women and the code of ethics amongst girlfriends. I was like, if you keep losing your lady friends year after year, place after place, job after job, here's why.
Yeah.
Just abide by a few common courtesy rules of how women operate, and you'll be fine. You can keep them for longer.
You have really consistently worked throughout since then. And do you find what is your take on Hollywood for the women over 50, or really the over 50 actor and actress?
Yeah.
Has it changed? Are there more roles available?
I think right up until the strike, there were definitely more roles available because we were in like a boom town. It was like everybody was making content and nobody was really worried if people were watching it or not. So there were a few years there where there was just all content all the time. And since the SAG strike, that has really slowed down. I feel like most people I know are not working, and it'll find its way again. I think there are roles for women over 50. I had the hardest time in the transition between leading lady to matriarch. Like it's a big jump. Like I was the right age to play an older woman, but I didn't quite have that energy yet. So it's just a transition from one to the other. But most of our stories are still focused around finding the person you want to breed with. Like there are much more interesting stories coming out of British television because they're not so consumed with, will I meet you? Will we get married? Will we have babies? It's like the titillation of finding a love partner is still the main center, I feel like, of most American dramas. So there's roles, it's just, do they have any meat to them? Is it worth it? And by the time you get to my age, if you have a big life, if you have a home to take care of, possibly a partner that you're in a relationship with that you don't want to be away, kids that you're trying to raise, it starts to come down to, is this role worth it? Yes, there's solvency and we all need to make money. So I just feel like we could still do a better job at writing formidable women over 50.
And your kids are teenagers now, and so how has that been now working on the show, and then you have teenagers as well? How's that working out?
It was better than most. I love little babies, like 0 to 5. If you sit next to me with a baby on the plane, all I want to do is get that baby from you so I can hold it and play with it and cuddle it inappropriately. I love the babies. And then from 5 to 15, they exhaust me. So I couldn't wait for my kids to be old enough to have more in-depth conversations and really just look at, like, who do you want to be? What do you want to do in the world? What do you want to give to the world? When the pandemic ended and we had all been home for 2 years, I was really like, I think if I go away, this is going to help them, because everybody was mad at mom all the time for everything. I was the root of all their sorrows. So the first season, I took them to Canada for 3 months and we lived in a tiny little apartment, and they're LA kids, which is like living in a suburb. So they went a little crazy. And then they were like, we're never doing that again. And they lived with dad full time in LA. We'd been divorced like 6 years by then. And my ex-husband, bless him, I don't know many men that could have 3 kids on their own, but it was a strain on everyone. I found a boarding school for the girls. I was like, my twins were going in, they were in 8th grade the first year. So it's like, what's the most exciting version of high school? If I get to go away for a job and the job brings in a really big income, where can I send them? We found a school in Switzerland where they go skiing all the time. And I was like, this is better than being home with mom. Like I really did stay home for 14 years. We all like that much better. My son was so happy to be alone with dad. So I have the dad role. I have him in the summer. I have him over Christmas and Thanksgiving and every other weekend when I'm shooting. He comes up once a month and I go down once a month. And the hardest part is the guilt. Like as a female, if you're not doing absolutely everything, and there's still an enormous amount of things like dentist cleanings that I'm doing while I'm on set. Like
scheduling. Yeah.
Oh my God. And like flying home for 8 hours so I can see one water polo game, and he doesn't care if I'm there or not, but my own guilt. I hate being a spectator at sports, but it's part of the job. So it has worked out so much better for everyone. My son will go away to college next year, and I literally was pushing him towards the schools I can get to easily from Canada. He was looking at University of Miami at one point. I was like, I will never see you. To Florida. Thank God there was yet another one of those horrific storms, and Ron DeSantis had not done anything to take care of the road. So he got stuck in an airport for 3 days and said, no, Miami.
Yeah.
Oh,
and I
wow.
didn't mean to laugh at that, everybody. No, I don't, I'm not laughing at what happened in Florida, but I get it. I get what you mean. Yes.
Before the hurricanes, there was no imminent threat. There was just too much rain, and it shut down the state for a period. So
right.
He finally saw what I was saying. I'm like, you cannot come home if you have a fever. You cannot, like, no one's coming to help you, love.
Right. You're that far
No
away.
one's coming to save you. So
yeah. I mean, and LA is so far from Florida too. Like if his dad tried to get there, my goodness.
Same thing. Like I was like, none of us can help. Like, this isn't a great place to start. You can transfer here, but let's start where there's like an option for a long weekend when you're tired. So it's been good, but the mom guilt is real and not really helpful to them or to me. So but I work on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think so many women feel that. I know I felt that, and I didn't, I was just like, when I taught school, if I had to go to a meeting and I couldn't be here or there, and oh my gosh. And I don't know, do you find women place that guilt on each other, or do you I felt like I felt more guilt from women, which I love women, but I felt more guilt from women than from men. I don't know.
Yeah. I didn't really know any when preschool started, and I met stay-at-home moms for the first time. And the moms that I were meeting were like Ivy League educated women who immediately went into making families. Like their job had always been family, and I feel like they took all the ambition they had for school and they put it towards family, be that snack or play dates or what activities their kids were in. And I felt enormous pressure. And I don't know if they were putting it on me or I was just looking at the choices I had made by that time. I know when someone is impressed with my job, and I know when someone is leery of me because of my job, and that makes sense too. And then it felt like there was a camp of women that were like, this is what we do. And it felt like it was tinged with ours. It's more important, but I never know if that was my own guilt.
Yeah.
Projecting onto them. I never, even my ex-husband, I remember saying, we're going to need a night nurse. I can't remember if it was with my son or when I had twins, like 16 months later. And he tried to say like, no, we'll just do it. And I said, okay, so we both work. So you want to stay up at night? Like he never guilted me into anything, but the privilege was real. The assumption was that it was going to get done, and that meant I was going to get it done. And then my nature, I feel like most mothers' nature is, I will do everything. And I did do everything. I think by the end of the pandemic, that's what I was seeing the effects of in my young teenagers of you're supposed to do everything.
Right.
Like, I don't think I've done them any favors now. So let me take some time and roll that back.
Right. And like you said earlier, mom's the one that gets,
everything.
Yeah, everything comes down on mom when it doesn't do right. Yeah.
Yeah, we are the emotional gatekeeper of the family.
Hmm.
And
Right.
um, even when I was dating, I was aware that women were the keeper of intimacy. Most of my dating life, I had a job where I made more money than the guy and I had to travel more than the guy. And if I was cool with that, he was cool with that. And when I finally wanted to slow down and be in one place, he was cool with that. And I was like, oh, this is me. So I'm determining how much depth is in here, how much emotional closeness is in here. I'm sure I come from a matriarchal line of women. I'm sure there are women in relationships with men where the man is setting the tone for most things, but that was never my experience. So with age, I've also imparted to my daughters early on. We can get a lot of things done. So sometimes on a date, do nothing. Don't carry the conversation. Don't make any plans and see if that person's bringing anything to you. Because if they're not, that might not be the person you want to date.
Well, that is really good advice. I think I'm going to tell my daughter that.
See, we share the wisdom on the
Yes,
show.
yes,
We
Yes.
share. And I do think, with age comes the wisdom, and it does release some of the guilt. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that mommy guilt is so strong when they're younger, but as you start to get older and you realize they're okay, they're doing
Yes.
just fine, then
Yes.
it's the guilt kind of releases a little bit, or at least I hope it does for you. 'Cause
yeah,
It
our
does.
kids are in their 20s and 30s, so
yeah, hmm yeah,
then there's the guilt, back at you that there's always one.
Oh, yeah. It's
yeah,
the same thing as
yeah,
Fire Country. Is Bodie in jail because Sharon screwed it all up?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
What can
yeah.
we expect for this new season?
Um, the first 2 years were really about redemption, like a Jesus character, right? He's trying to win back his place in society. And this season he has it. So this year's about legacy. So first of all, it's what kind of man does he want to be? Who does he get to be if he's not in orange? If people aren't judging him right out of the gate, and orange because that's what the inmates were on the show. And for Sharon, it's this thing that we're talking about right here. Everybody in the show works at the firehouse, but if her actual job, if the job of her heart was to save her son and to rescue her kid and to lure him out of the darkness, if that job is done, who is Sharon? So it's a little bit of, oh, I may not be doing him any favors, just like I had with my own kids. So I really shouldn't get involved with getting him a job. I really shouldn't get involved in his love story and make that work or make that not work. So she's trying to figure out who she is if she's not there to save her kid.
Okay, we can look forward to that. That's
That
a
I
little
know.
spoiler,
And it's
everybody.
so just mom relatable. Not even the same
Mm.
situation, but
Yes.
the thing that a mom feels. It's so
It's
relatable.
that it's
Yes.
that emotion that's on the surface, and
Right.
it's so great, and you do such a great job, and we
Yes.
really appreciate you coming on today, and thank you for all you're doing, because your writing is wonderful and it's very expressive, and I think it touches a lot of people as well. So
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.